You see, in life, there are moments born to be framed and hung on the wall. This is one of them. But it's not mine. My sister Brooke is the sun of this entire universe. Beautiful, radiant, with a smile rehearsed 100 times in the mirror to look both humble and proud. She's receiving a prestigious award, a testament to her meteoric career. My whole family sits in the front row, like loyal planets orbiting her path. My father, Admiral Robert Hayes, a man the entire Pacific Fleet respects, gazes at her with a look I've never received. And me? I'm back there. I'm Avery Hayes. In my family's world, I'm a footnote, a chapter torn out. The eldest daughter who dropped out of the Naval Academy, supposedly stuck in some dull desk job somewhere. My presence here is just to complete the perfect family portrait. A reporter asks, their voice booming through the mic, "Officer Hayes, what inspiration and breakthrough strategy led to the resounding success of Operation Sentinel?" Brooke smiles, ready to deliver a prepped answer. But she never gets the chance. A tall, steady figure rises from the front row of senior officers, Rear Admiral Sterling. He doesn't step to the podium, but moves to the nearest mic. His voice isn't loud, but it carries an invisible weight that silences every other sound. "Officer Brooke Hayes' dedication is commendable," he says, his gaze sweeping the room before locking onto me at the back. But to answer your question accurately, the brain and chief architect of Operation Sentinel is actually sitting back there. He raises his hand, pointing directly at me. Commander Avery Hayes. The entire strategy, every line of secure code, every critical decision was hers. Boom! That's the sound of a world collapsing. Hundreds of eyes turn to me, not with curiosity, but with utter shock. It's like a dam bursting in silence. I see Brooke's face shift from radiant to ashen, then flush red with shock and humiliation. I see my father freeze in his seat, and I just sit there, calmly facing the storm. Hold on. Pause for a second. Can you feel that air? That sensation when a truth, buried too long, is suddenly exposed to the light? This isn't just an awkward family moment. It's the starting gun for everything. This is a story about the cost of being invisible, about the battles we fight in the shadows that no one knows. In today's video, I won't just tell you what happened after that bombshell moment. I'll take you behind the scenes of a world you've never seen, into classified command rooms where billion-dollar decisions and thousands of lives hinge on a single mouse click. I'll show you what a real war looks like, not against enemies across borders, but against envy, ambition, and rotting secrets within your own family. And trust me, that press conference moment, it's just the tip of the iceberg. The real scandal, the security breach that could threaten a nation, hasn't even started. Stay with me. We're going to peel this apart together. Right now. The silence shattered. The press room turned into an arena. Cameras that had been trained on my sister swiveled 180 degrees, transforming me from an invisible shadow into the eye of a storm. I didn't linger to savor the moment. Instincts honed by years of operating in the dark kicked in. I stood, avoiding eye contact with my family, and headed straight for the side exit, moving with a calm that parted the crowd. Just before the door closed, I heard Brooke hiss behind me, her voice no longer that of a polished media officer, but of a betrayed sister. "You ruined everything!" I paused for a second, turning just enough for our eyes to meet through the door's crack. I said low enough for only her to hear. "The truth doesn't ruin anything, Brooke. It just exposes what was already broken." Then the door slammed shut, cutting me off from that chaos, but trapping me in another storm, one that had been simmering in my heart for a decade. Amid the screech of cars racing down the San Diego freeway, my mind drifted to a quieter, sunnier day. 10 years ago, in this same California, but at a small Coronado cafe with the faint tang of sea salt in the air, I just made a life-altering decision to leave the prestigious Naval Academy. My family called it quitting. The truth was far more complex, but that truth was classified. My mother, Carol, stirred her coffee, her eyes on me not with anger, but with something worse. Sadness. Pity. She set her spoon down, took my hand, and spoke in the gentle tone she'd used to soothe us as kids. "I know you're lost, Avery," she said. "You have a good heart. That's precious, but not everyone's born to sit in the command chair. You don't have the ruthlessness it takes. You're too sensitive. And that's okay. You have to accept that to be happy. A good heart. Too sensitive. Not born for command." Those words, meant as comfort, became my sentence in their eyes. They set the unspoken rule for every interaction that followed. They were why Brooke's smallest achievements were celebrated like she'd planted a flag on the moon, while I was treated with a patronizing kindness, the way you'd treat a less fortunate relative. So I learned to live in two worlds. The first was my real world. Windowless rooms buried deep underground, lit by the eerie blue glow of data streaming across screens. 3 a.m. meetings with Langley analysts over encrypted lines. I was Commander Avery Hayes, codename Oracle, designing cyber defense systems to thwart hostile attacks, able to scan a global tactical map and pinpoint an enemy's weakness before it formed. I ran covert operations like Project Nightingale, averting a financial collapse in Asia with a few hundred lines of code. That world was where I belonged, where my skills were all that mattered. The second was my family's world. There, I was just Avery. At Thanksgiving, my father would ask, "How's that desk job going, kid? Still steady?" Brooke would talk about her trips to Germany, Japan, while my latest was to an unmarked bunker in the Nevada desert. I'd smile, nod, and offer bland responses. I watched them celebrate my sister's promotions, hanging her uniformed photos on the wall beside Dad's. None of mine were there. In the story my family told the world, I was a supporting character who'd left the stage long ago. A call from Dad a week before the ceremony dragged me back to that stage. His voice on the phone held the full authority of an admiral, softened only slightly by family ties. Brooke's getting a big award. The whole family needs to be there. It's a major day for her. It wasn't an invitation. It was an order. So I drove to San Diego, back to the house where I grew up, where the air still felt heavy with the familiar weight of expectations and unspoken truths. My mother fussed over whether Brooke's dress was perfect enough. My father gave me a perfunctory pat on the shoulder before turning to discuss politics with a cousin's husband. Brooke, in her flurry of activity, glanced at me and said, "Thanks for coming, sis. Try not to steal the spotlight, okay?" I didn't. I did exactly what they expected. I became a shadow. Until Rear Admiral Sterling decided to flip on the light. And now that shadow had taken shape, standing tall in the middle of their living room, and no one knew what to do next. I didn't go home after the press conference. I knew it was no longer a safe haven. Instead, I drove to a nondescript motel on the outskirts of town, anonymous enough for me to disappear, at least for a while. My phone buzzed relentlessly. Dozens of calls from Dad, Mom, and countless texts from distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. I powered it off. Silence was the only luxury I could afford right now. I needed a clear head because I knew the storm was just beginning. And I was right. The storm hit faster than I expected, but it didn't come from the media or my family. It came from the world I'd tried to keep hidden. At 2 a.m., my encrypted laptop, a device only the Pentagon could remotely activate, lit up with a crimson warning. Protocol Azure. Asset compromised. Immediate action required. My heart stopped. Protocol Azure was one of our most sensitive cyber surveillance operations in the South China Sea. It was the Pacific Fleet's eyes and ears, tracking every enemy move in the region. Asset compromised meant we were blind. The enemy didn't just know we were watching. They might have seized control of the system. I dove into work, my fingers flying across the keyboard at a speed no desk clerk could match. Within 10 minutes, I'd traced the breach's origin. The initial crack wasn't a sophisticated external attack. It came from within, specifically from an email. An angry email sent from an internal Navy IP address hours earlier, right after the press conference. The sender had tried to leak files claiming to prove my incompetence to a fringe military blogger. And embedded in those files was malware, turning the email into a perfect Trojan horse. The system revealed the sender's identity. No surprise. It was my sister, Brooke Hayes. In a blind rage, she hadn't just tried to ruin my career. She'd flung open the door for the enemy to walk into our house. Before I could decide my next move, my motel room door was pounded hard. Not a polite knock. This was the kind of banging from people who don't wait. Through the peephole, I saw 2 naval security officers in plain clothes. I opened the door. "Commander Hayes," one said, his voice flat. "Admiral Hayes requests your presence." Immediately. They didn't take me home. They drove me to a covert security facility tucked within Naval Base Coronado. They led me through steel-reinforced corridors, stopping at a room called the Green Room. It was reserved for the highest level crises. Inside, my father stood, his uniform seeming heavier on his shoulders. His face was etched with exhaustion and anger. In the corner, pale as a ghost, was Brooke. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "The Pentagon just called," Dad said, his voice hoarse. "They've given me 1 hour to handle this before they send a team from DC. I don't care who's right, who's wrong, or who started it. All I know," he turned to Brooke with an icy stare, "is that you've created a mess that could cost lives." Then he looked at me. "And you, Avery, are the only one in this room who can clean it up. Protocol Azure is your program. I need you to regain control, find out what they took, and patch the breach." He took a deep breath. "You two will work together. In this room. Until it's fixed." That's an order. The air in the room thickened, tenser than the press conference. Brooke finally looked up at me, her eyes a mix of fear, shame, and a hint of defiance. She, a media star, was now forced to work under the sister she'd always dismissed. I didn't waste time on family drama. I stepped to the main console, where a bank of screens flashed red warnings. I slipped on a headset. "All right," I said, my voice cold and commanding, the voice of a commander, not a sister. "Officer Brooke Hayes, report everything you did since 1800 hours. Every email, every attachment, every contact. I want it all. Now. National security's at stake, and we're done with personal feelings." For the first time in her life, my sister stood at attention, looked at me, and answered with a single word. Her voice shaky but resolute. "Understood." The real fight was just beginning. The green room had no windows. The air was morgue cold, the only light coming from a long bank of screens dominating one wall. In a corner, my father stood with arms crossed, silent as a statue, his shadow stretching across the floor. He wasn't an admiral now, but a father watching his two worlds collide in a crisis he couldn't control. My sister and I sat apart, a chasm of unspoken words and silence between us. I began the interrogation, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. This wasn't Avery, the sister, speaking. This was Commander Hayes conducting a damage assessment. "Start from the beginning," I ordered. "The file you sent, its source. Why did you have it?" Brooke swallowed hard, her eyes glued to the screen in front of her, avoiding mine. It came to my work email from an anonymous address," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "The message said it was proof you'd violated protocol in an old op, that you were a liability." I was furious. After the press conference, I wanted someone to know you weren't as perfect as they thought. She hesitated, then continued. "I forwarded it to a blogger I knew who writes anti-military pieces. I thought it'd just be a smear article. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know there was anything else in it. Send me the original email, including metadata." I cut in, offering no comfort. She transferred the file to my station. My screen lit up with hundreds of code lines. The Trojan horse Brooke had naively let through wasn't just ordinary malware. It was sophisticated, custom-built, like a master key crafted for a single lock. And that lock was the heart of Protocol Azure. The attacker didn't just want inside the house. They wanted the blueprints. I scanned the code, my senses sharpened by thousands of hours facing the world's best hackers, picking up anomalies. The coding style, it had a familiar boldness and arrogance. It wasn't just efficient, it was showy, like the author wanted to leave an invisible signature. Then I saw it. A small snippet, a secondary encryption algorithm buried deep in the wrapper. It was nearly flawless, but I'd seen it once before. Years ago in a joint project, I'd argued fiercely with another officer about this very algorithm. I'd said it had a theoretical flaw. He'd defended it with fierce pride. Gavin Price. My old mentor, Commander Shaw's warning echoed in my mind. Watch out for those who stand beside you, smiling and envying. Gavin had always seen me as a rival. He believed my position should have been his. He had enough knowledge of my programs and clearly enough motive. This wasn't random. It was a calculated trap. Gavin had crafted a poisoned arrow, and my sister, in her rage, had become the archer firing it at our own family. "Brooke," I said, my voice now carrying a new urgency. "Did the anonymous sender say anything else? Any detail that seemed irrelevant?" Brooke frowned, straining to recall. "Just one line. It sounded odd. Ask your sister about Mosul. She owes us an answer." Mosul. That's where Gavin and I had our heated clash over the algorithm years ago. He wasn't just attacking my system, he was playing a psychological game, a taunt only I'd understand. "Dad," I said, turning to my father for the first time, "I need access to Officer Gavin Price's activity and location logs for the past 48 hours. Highest priority." My father's eyes flashed with surprise, then hardened with resolve. He grabbed the secure phone and started issuing orders. I turned back to my console, a plan forming. This crisis wasn't about patching a hole anymore. It had become a hunt. Gavin thought he'd set a perfect trap, using my own family against me. But he'd made a fatal mistake. He underestimated me. And he didn't know that in the shadow world of cyber warfare, I was the predator. "Brooke," I commanded, "access the fleet's communication archives. I need you to filter all encrypted signals leaving the San Diego area in the last 12 hours using the compression protocol I'm sending you. Ignore everything else." She looked at me, her face full of confusion, but didn't question it. For the first time, she didn't see me as her failed sister, but as a force of nature she couldn't comprehend. In that look, I saw a spark of change, but now wasn't the time for that. Now was the time to hunt. The green room became a machine, a strange machine, powered by 3 people who, hours ago, couldn't share a living room without tension choking the air. My father turned liaison, leveraging his authority and connections to gather human intelligence. Brooke, with her media officer skills, became a raw data filter, her eyes darting across communication logs, hunting for anomalies under my guidance. And me, I was the central brain, stitching together scattered data points to paint a complete picture. At first, Brooke worked with a nervous awkwardness. The fingers that once typed flawless speeches fumbled on the analytics system's keyboard. But under pressure, her trained officer instincts kicked in. She focused, her face hardening, and began working with surprising efficiency. I watched her quickly grasp the parameters I set, sifting through terabytes of noise to isolate what we needed. "Got something." Her voice broke the room's quiet after 20 minutes, slicing through the stillness. "A rogue signal chain sent at 2247. It matches the compression protocol you mentioned. Originated from a San Diego IP, but routed through multiple proxy servers in Eastern Europe before vanishing." "Send it to me," I said. Data streamed onto my main screen. It was like chasing a ghost. Every time I got close to the source, the signal hopped to another address. Gavin was good. He was leading me into a digital maze, a classic stalling tactic. But he didn't know I didn't need to follow his path. I could see the whole maze from above. While I tracked the electronic trail, Dad slid a thin folder onto the table. "Gavin Price's file," he said. "Records show he's on leave. Checked out of base 3 days ago. Declared destination, visiting family in Portland, Oregon. A lie. A calculated lie. He'd crafted a perfect real-world alibi while waging a virtual war right under our noses." I stopped chasing the signal. Instead, I analyzed the data packets themselves. That's when I found it. A tiny delay, just a few nanoseconds in each transmission. An imperfection no modern server would have. It was like a unique scratch on a bullet. That scratch could only come from specific hardware. An outdated military data relay, supposedly decommissioned years ago. A ghost server. He wasn't hiding in Eastern Europe. He was holed up in a relic of our own system. Unbelievable arrogance. He thought no one remembered those ancient devices. "Dad," I said, eyes fixed on the screen, "I need a map of the Navy's old telecom infrastructure in this region. Specifically, data relay stations decommissioned after 2010. My father acted instantly. A detailed map appeared on a secondary screen. Only 3 sites matched. 2 were completely demolished. 1 remained. A small comm station in an abandoned concrete bunker on the desert's edge about 50 miles from base. A place no one noticed. Perfect for a covert war." I looked at Brooke. "Can you do something for me?" She nodded, her expression expectant. "You've watched me work," I said. "You saw how I dissected the encryption layers. Now I need you to do the same with Gavin's public comms reports from the past months. Look for anomalies. Repeated keywords, unnatural phrasing. Find a sign he planned this. It was a test. And this time I saw not envy in her eyes, but awe and a spark of determination. She dove in without complaint. She was learning. Meanwhile, I had enough evidence. A physical location, a suspect, and a lie in his personnel file. I stood, turning to my father, who'd watched my every move with a heavy silence. "Dad," I said firmly, "I found him. I pointed to a glowing dot on the map, Relay Station Baker 7. He's there. An emotion flickered across my father's face. Astonishment, and maybe, for the first time in years, unmasked pride. He didn't ask a single question. He grabbed the red phone, his voice now ringing with the full authority of an admiral commanding a battle. I need a rapid response team, fully geared. Coordinates. The digital hunt was over. The real hunt was about to begin. Time seemed to solidify in the green room. My father hung up the phone, the order given. Now we could only wait. Silence enveloped us, but it wasn't the awkward hush from before. It was the focused calm of soldiers before a battle. Over the internal comms, I could hear the rotor blades of 2 Black Hawk helicopters tearing through the California night, racing toward the desert. I didn't sit idle. I turned my screen into a tactical command hub. I pulled up old blueprints of Relay Station Baker 7, pinpointing weaknesses in its structure, ventilation, and wiring. I couldn't see inside, but I could predict where Gavin would be and how the rapid response team could catch him off guard. Alpha Team has landed. Approaching target from the east, a calm voice crackled through the speaker. No signs of detection. Brooke sat rigid, her eyes glued to a secondary screen I'd assigned her to monitor. Her task was simple. Watch for any slight change in the station's power consumption. A spike could mean Gavin was gearing up for something. Then all hell broke loose. Avery! Brooke's voice cracked, pointing at her screen. Power consumption just spiked. It's tripled. He's doing something. At the same moment, my screens blazed with red alerts. Warning! Unauthorized access detected in Protocol Azure's data core. Scorched Earth, self-destruct, protocol activated. That bastard. He'd set a trap. He knew we were coming. He wasn't planning to run. He was going to erase everything. Every piece of evidence, every bit of data, and worse, he was trying to trigger a feedback surge, sending a lethal electromagnetic pulse back through the fleet's main grid, potentially causing catastrophic damage. He's wiping the drives. I shouted, my hands flying across the keyboard. I can't stop it from the main port. He's locked me out. Alpha Team, breach now. Repeat, breach now. My father roared into the mic. Suspect is destroying evidence. An explosion echoed through the speaker as the team blasted the bunker door. Target in sight. He's at the main console. But it was too late. The data wipe progress bar on my screen was at 70%. We had seconds left. Brooke? I spun to my sister, a single possibility flashing in my mind, a backdoor only a comms specialist might know. I need you to access the TCOM 7 auxiliary comms port. It's an old line, not covered by his lockout protocol. Send a physical disconnect command to the main switch. The code is Sierra Novem Echo 39. You've got one shot. Brooke's eyes widened in panic. This was territory she'd never touched, but her hesitation lasted a millisecond. She nodded, her face pale but resolute. She shoved everything aside and started typing, mouthing each character to avoid a mistake. Alpha Team engaging. He's armed, shouts blared from the speaker. Data wipe progress. 90%. I'm in, Brooke screamed. Sending command. Now! It all happened in 17 seconds of hell. As Brooke's finger hit enter, the progress bar on my screen froze at 98%. Red alerts shifted to yellow, then green. The feedback surge was cut off. The grid was safe. Suspect neutralized. Alpha Team's voice came through, panting but triumphant. The green room fell silent again. I slowly leaned back in my chair, adrenaline draining, leaving bone-deep exhaustion. I turned to Brooke. She was gasping, hands still on the keyboard, trembling. She looked up at me, and this time, there was no fear or shame. Instead, there was something new. Understanding. She hadn't just witnessed my fight. She joined it, and she hadn't failed. My father placed one hand on my shoulder, then one on Brooke's. He said nothing, but I felt a faint tremor in his grip. In that moment, we weren't an admiral and his subordinates. We weren't a father and 2 feuding daughters. We were a team that had just walked through fire together. The hunt was over. Gavin Price was in custody, but I knew the real fight for my family, the fight to mend what was broken, was only just beginning. Dawn broke over the California desert, painting the clouds pink. But for us, the new day had started hours earlier in the artificial chill of the green room. Gavin Price had been taken into custody. The immediate crisis was averted. What remained was exhaustion and an undeniable truth lying bare among the 3 of us. A few hours later, we weren't sent home. We were summoned to a formal meeting room, No longer a war room, this was an interrogation chamber. A preliminary report of Gavin Price's confession sat before us. No political conspiracy drove him. No foreign power pulled the strings. His motive was pitifully simple: envy. He believed I'd stolen the position and recognition that should have been his. This attack was a final, bitter attempt to destroy my career. He'd used Brooke's discontent as a tool, a weapon he didn't even need to fire himself. After reading the report, no one spoke for a long time. This silence was heavier than during the chase. Finally, Brooke broke it. She stood, not as my sister, but as a United States Navy officer. Facing my father and me, she took a deep breath. "Admiral, Commander," her voice was clear, though trembling. "I take full responsibility for my actions. There's no excuse for letting personal feelings and jealousy cloud my judgment, endangering national security. I violated my oath. I'm prepared to accept any disciplinary measures." She didn't apologize for being deceived. She owned her choice to take that path in the first place. Then she turned to me. "Avery," she said, her voice softer. "I'm sorry for everything." Before I could respond, my father stood. His face, that of a man I rarely saw show anything but sternness, was etched with deep regret. "No," he said, his voice low and firm. "I'm the one who bears the first responsibility. I created an environment where recognition trumped family. I was too focused on stars on shoulders, on medals, and forgot to look at my daughter's hearts." He looked at Brooke. "I put pressure on you to always be perfect. That wasn't fair." Then he met my eyes. "And you, Avery, I didn't see you. Not because you were invisible, but because I chose not to look. I let my pride define your path, and that was my greatest failure as a father and a commander. I'm sorry." Hearing those words, a weight I'd carried for 10 years seemed to dissolve. I didn't need fanfare. I just needed the truth acknowledged. I looked at my father, then my sister, and gave a slow nod. An old chapter had closed. 6 months later, my life had changed. I was still a strategist, but no longer entirely in the shadows. I took a teaching post at the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, passing on my expertise in asymmetric warfare to the next generation of leaders. And in every class, in the front row, sat an unusually attentive student, Brooke. She'd accepted her punishment, a 5-year bar on promotions. Instead of sulking, she enrolled in my courses. No longer the shining star, she was a diligent student, asking the deepest questions, challenging my arguments constructively. One afternoon, she handed me a 30-page proposal on overhauling secure comm systems. On the cover, a single line: "Please review, sis." My family found a new rhythm, too. Dad called me weekly. We didn't talk ops or global threats. He asked about my students, the book I was reading. For the first time, he spoke to me as a father, not an admiral. On a visit home, I saw a new photo on the mantle, next to Brooke and Dad in their uniforms. It was the 3 of us in the green room that fateful night. Not a pretty moment, but a real one. The moment we became a team. On my birthday, I got a small package from Brooke. Inside was a simple cake, iced in blue. It bore 3 words: General, Sister, Mentor. In life, some battles leave no scars on the skin, but carve deep canyons in the soul. My story taught me that your worth isn't in others' recognition, but in your actions when no one's watching. True strength isn't never falling, but looking at the wreckage and choosing to build something new, stronger. And sometimes, the greatest courage is forgiveness. Not just forgiving others, but forgiving yourself for ever believing you weren't enough. If this story touched you, if it made you feel less alone on your own journey, drop a comment and share your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to keep sharing and hearing stories about the hidden strength inside us all. Thanks for listening.